kill you. Kept you waiting. Huh? Let's fucking go.
So, I recently watched my first few videos, and man, they sucked. They almost got deleted, but I kept them as a reminder of humble beginnings. And although I was squirming with embarrassment, it really made me want to play Splinter Cell again. When I started Hypertension Films, I knew they would be the first games I covered, but I couldn't exactly articulate why. After playing them again recently, I now understand perfectly why I love talking about Splinter Cell. And now that I have a bit more experience doing this kind of stuff, I thought that these games deserved a much higher quality, updated retrospective. And since I came into the PC versions recently, just like I'm gonna do to you if you don't like this video, I figured it was high time to talk Splinter Cell again. The game we know and love initially started out in 1999 as a game called The Drift. According to early concepts, you would have played as a reluctant hero known as Buster. Earth had been wiped out and humanity began to rebuild itself on floating hunks of rock in space. Think Columbia in BioShock Infinite. Buster would have used a modular weapon that would eventually evolve into the SC-20K, with the ability to shoot grappling hooks, sticky cameras, and could give the player multiple vision modes. Sound familiar? The team started to incorporate security cameras and stealthy, non-lethal combat options as well. The concept is very fascinating, but Ubisoft Montreal was given a mandate to make a quote, Metal Gear Solid 2 killer, and thus, development shifted towards what we now know as Splinter Cell. Although there was clearly an influence from games like Thief and Deus Ex, the Metal Gear inspiration has always been evident. As Metal Gear withered and died following Part 5, Ubisoft would pay a small tribute to Snake via Sam Fisher in Ghost Recon. As touching as this is, having Sam Fisher say that he's the only one left as Ubisoft promptly continued doing nothing with the character is corny. I'm sorry, did I say nothing? Hey, wait a minute. I'm supposed to save my snarky rant for the end of the video. Honestly, I don't think I gave the story of Splinter Cell a fair shake in my first review. Our protagonist, Samuel Leo Fisher, is a seasoned combat veteran, now joining the NSA's newly formed covert division, Third Echelon. Third Echelon is being commanded by Irving Lambert, a former colonel that Sam knew from the old days, likely as a part of JSOC. Turns out, a CIA officer, Blaustein, had gone missing under newly appointed Georgian President Kombay Nikolaadze. Another officer sent in to investigate, Madison, also disappeared. Sam Fisher is tasked with sneaking into the country to locate the agents. As it turns out, the agents discovered Nikolaadz's secret ethnic cleansing campaign across Azerbaijan. Once this was exposed to the public, Nikolads launched a cyber attack on the US, declaring war. Through Fisher's intelligence gathering, it also turns out that Nikolads had been in collusion with a Chinese splinter faction led by General Kong Ferong, working against the wishes of the Chinese government. A nuclear suitcase bomb, the Ark, has been left somewhere in the US, and Nikolads is the only one that knows where it is. Nikolads is offered protection by the surrogate Georgian president in exchange for the location of the Ark. Lambert is like, no, and orders Fisher to snipe Nikolads before escaping the presidential palace. After which, he has a nice relaxing afternoon at home with his daughter Sarah. He, like myself, watches the television and chuckles at the lies being fed to the American public, before receiving a phone call from Lambert about his next mission. And this is exactly where I think I sort of shortchanged the story in my first review. I kind of dismissed it as not a big deal, and I'd like to rectify that. I love a good globe-trotting spy thriller, and to that end, Splinter Cell weaves a great tale. And despite the dead serious themes, there's also plenty of humor from the main characters, as well as NPCs scattered throughout the levels, and it's done through clever writing, not the constant Marvel quipping that every game seems to want to adopt nowadays.
How can I help you?
I'd like to register a complaint.
Then you'll have to ask at the desk to your right.
Very well.
May I help you?
You're the same cop.
Yes, but this is the public relations desk.
Fine. I would like to register a complaint.
Of course, sir. If you could just have a seat until somebody's ready to help you.
You've got to be kidding me.
I could easily...
I suppose I was making an unfair comparison to Metal Gear, where the characters are more exaggerated and memorable, but having just completed Snake Eater multiple times over recently, I really appreciated the stripped-back, grounded story of Splinter Cell. And, unlike Metal Gear, Splinter Cell gets to the point quicker. So despite saving the world through a series of dramatic exploits, Sam doesn't need to have a hero's welcome. It's just another day at work, and in the end, he simply picks up the phone for another job. And a major impression that the game left with so many of us is the character of Sam Fisher. Solid Snake is the epitome of the fantastical, cool guy lead character. He's gruff, tough, ripped, and smooth with the ladies. He can take down a nuclear-equipped walking deathmobile while smoking a butt. By contrast, Sam Fisher is much more believable. Sure, he eventually became an unstoppable killing machine, capable of murdering someone with a urinal, but in the initial games, he's just a workhorse. He's not a brash young hothead. He's been there, done that, and doesn't care about the glory or the praise. He doesn't even completely agree with his government or their covert activities, but it's his job and he understands the greater evils of the world and the importance of stopping them. And his design is perfect. He's built like a man you certainly wouldn't want to cross, but isn't designed like an over-the-top, roided-up action figure. Sam has grays coming in above his ears, and the little touches like the dad noises when he lifts a body go such a long way in making Fisher feel genuine. The sneaking suit is cool, but it's not too overly high-tech, and of course, the night vision goggles were instantly iconic. 3 tubes for NVGs doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint, but it doesn't have to. It was designed to look cool and be instantly recognizable, like Snake's bandana. There are real goggles that kinda look similar, but thankfully the team wasn't obsessed with pure realism and instead chose to have some fun with Sam's design, and they succeeded. To this day, I watch, in vain, every gaming convention in the hopes that we'll see those 3 green lights again. And a story like this continues to be relevant. I know people have criticized Tom Clancy properties for having sort of a revolving door of Russians and Chinese villains, and that certainly is the case in this game, but I suppose we tend to forget that, in reality, the major powers of the world are constantly vying for pole position, and sadly, this seems like it will remain so until one of these idiots nukes us all. But we're talking fiction here. Nobody from an area of Russian influence would cause harm to Azerbaijan. Oh. Well, at least there are no longer any controversies with Georgian presidents. Oh. Oh. Huh. A dispute over voting in places named Georgia. What are the odds? Oh. Alright, enough of that crap. Let's get to what really matters. Metal Gear was the really big pioneer in stealth gaming, but the team behind Splinter Cell was determined to evolve that genre past its competitor, and quite frankly, I think they succeeded. Truth be told, the first Splinter Cell is a little clunky if you compare it to games like Chaos Theory or Blacklist, but there's no question that this first title pushed stealth gaming to another level. At the time, Metal Gear Solid was the king, with the second game being a massive hit. But as good as the game is, and I love Sons of Liberty, it was functionally more or less the same game as the first. Same camera, similar mechanics with little evolutions. When Splinter Cell came around, the player could move the camera freely with the right stick. It seems obvious now, but this was a big stride forward for stealth gaming. So much so that when the third Metal Gear, Snake Eater, came around, most people, myself included, wished they had brought this camera over. The demand was so great that, upon being reissued, Snake Eater eventually offered this camera, and I'd like to think that it was thanks to Splinter Cell. The camouflage index in Snake Eater also felt like a direct response to Splinter Cell's light meter, a small bar on the UI that indicated quite simply how hidden you were. It really is incredible, to this day, that feeling of being invisible, and thanks to the meter, it's not guesswork. It's also imperative that you hide bodies in these shadows. If you run around leaving them out in the light, the game will scan for these corpses, which leads to increased alarms. Some missions have a 0 alarm policy, others having 3 maximum. There's nothing more crushing in Splinter Cell than making it to the end of a level and hearing that a body had been discovered 2 checkpoints back, and getting a game over as a result. To that end, I kinda hate this system, frankly. It sucks because you could swear that you set a body down in the darkest shadow, but sometimes it's just not good enough. The sequel, Pandora Tomorrow, had a clever improvement for this, but that's for another time. On the other hand, I appreciate that this system discourages a pure blood and guts, reckless abandon approach to the game. Sam does have lethal tools, and there are even times when combat is basically forced on you, but the emphasis for the original Splinter Cell trilogy, first and foremost, was stealth. Slinking through these inky black shadows feels perfect, and the game even references Sam Fisher as a signals intelligence ninja, which is bang on. Taking influence from Thief with Garrett's water arrows, Sam can shape his environment by shooting out lights. Sometimes the game will cleverly do things like put protective cages over certain lights so that you can't, causing you the need to further improvise. When the game came out, I hadn't played Thief just yet, so this was new and remarkable to my young mind. Now, the pistol is a bit of a shit show, and aiming this thing can be a pain in the butt, especially on console. It's slightly better on PC, but just ever so. I remember this being a bit of a trend in old Tom Clancy titles, having to settle down for a few seconds to get the most accurate shot. I do appreciate the attention to detail, as it would be rather difficult to be running around getting your heart rate up and then sit completely still and shoot a light bulb 10 yards out with a pistol. I get that, but it's a video game, and to that end, it kinda sucks. Additionally, grappling an enemy can be super finicky. You can't just snatch them up from anywhere, but rather you have to be right behind them. And sometimes you could swear you were being quiet, only for them to spin round and bust you. One alarm, oh, that's the end for you, mister. Ugh. It can be kind of frustrating at times, but I don't want to be too dramatic. It's touch and go, but it's not awful or anything. The trial and error gameplay can be a bit of a turnoff for some though, and I remember this being a big complaint from certain publications back when, but in this regard, I will say it kind of depends on which version you're playing. So I grew up playing the Xbox and PS2 versions as a kid, and I only recently started playing this on PC, and frankly, I was surprised at how much more enjoyable this version is. I'm currently working on a video for the Splinter Cell ports on a certain purple cube, and frankly, going back to those right after the PC versions was kinda rough. The buttery frame rate, higher resolutions, widescreen support, and the use of mouse and keyboard specifically made the action sequences much more manageable. But the biggest difference with the PC port was the ability to quick save. Instantly reloading a quick save negated a lot of the frustration that came with failure. Now, the game was built for the Xbox, so if that's the version you have, it's still wonderful, especially because it's enhanced on the Xbox One, or the Series X, or Series S. Stupid names. The Xbox was the original vision, and no extra content was added on the PC, but god damn it, those quick saves were mighty nice. Also, and this is something I learned when I played Chaos Theory on the PC a few years ago, but using the scroll wheel to control how fast or slow you move is just so good. It shouldn't matter as much as it did, but it really did. Going back and playing with a controller was fine, but I definitely ran when I wanted to creep a few times because I put just too much pressure on the joystick, and it was kind of annoying. Being able to scroll into a set speed became so comfortable, but make no mistake, the original Xbox version is still wonderful. It's the version I played for my original review. If you're curious about how the GameCube ports of all the Splinter Cell games are, subscribe now and stay tuned. But there is one minor complaint I have about the PC version. You can't use your numerical keys to type in key codes. Deus Ex had that figured out a few years prior, so it's kinda lame, but again, it's small potatoes.
Kawabunga.
The original Splinter Cell has some moments where you really can fancy yourself quite the little super spy. Like when you rappel down a wall and take down a sentry with one well-placed bullet through a window. That is ice cold. What follows, unfortunately, is another complaint that I have, and that's when the action is forced. If you get into a situation like this without much ammo or health, you can really kind of be up the creek, and well, too bad. It can be pretty punishing, especially for newcomers. But there are some options. You can get a grenade here, which works well, and the aiming arc is easy to understand. And you can actually just hide by hanging out of this window in this part. I just didn't record that. But there are some times when the action is just plain unavoidable, like in the abattoir. Preparation definitely pays. You can place wall mines around and disable friendly fire on these turrets, and that's great and all, but the controls were simply not built for fast-paced action. It's clunky and can be kind of frustrating. But the abattoir isn't as bad as the presidential palace. First, there's the battle in the library, which, again, I have to say, thank goodness for those quick saves, because this battle is just plain corny. This is then followed up with the fight underground against the Special Forces troops who also have night vision. Hope you stocked up on your med kits throughout the entire level. There are also times when Ubisoft wanted to throw in some platforming into the mix. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not Rayman. There's an entire section at the start of the Presidential Palace where Sam is essentially Enzio Auditore. But then there's quite a clever segment in which Sam needs to reach a broadcast antenna on the other side of a rooftop. The catch is, the roof is covered with soft, loud metal. If you hit the roof, the bad guys come running. You need to use your head and climb accordingly to avoid that. You also need to time your movements to avoid this intermittent bright light, which oddly enough was removed from the GameCube port. Anyway, look, it's not rocket science, but it really is a bright idea that doesn't overstay its welcome. And as I say, this demonstrates early shades of where Ubisoft would go with Assassin's Creed about 5 years later. Then Ubisoft went to Assassin's Creed again, and again, and again, and just fuck Splinter Cell, I guess. Have this again. Sam also has his lockpicks, disposable lockpicks, an optical cable to peek under doors, and a directional mic. All the tools are fun to use, but the directional mic in particular was so cool. Recording a conversation from the shadows felt like such high-tech cool guy stuff. Yeah, I know Metal Gear did it first, but it was still fun here. The night vision goggles, however, separated Sam from Snake. Yeah, Snake had thermal goggles and night vision goggles, but they were a little more for specific sequences, whereas Sam's goggles felt more like an extension of the character, and with how important hiding in the dark is, it's great to be able to light your way at the push of a button. Also, I always loved the more whitish green hue that Splinter Cell had for night vision, as opposed to the pure green from Metal Gear Solid. It just felt fresh and different, I don't know. The thermal goggles, aside from the obvious use, were smartly incorporated into the game at certain points. Using them in a frozen meat locker felt like something out of a spy novel. During a section with a minefield, Sam can use the thermals to avoid the buried mines. Pretty sweet, but the most clever and inventive section was in the Chinese embassy. All throughout the game, Sam can find codes for keypad locks. Neato. But here, there are no codes, and Sam has to trail an officer, wait for him to use a keypad, and just after he gets out of sight, you gotta run up, hit the goggles, and then follow the heat signature on the keypad from the guy's fingers to get the code. Whoever thought of this, you'll probably never see my video, but if you do, you are a smart cookie. That is such a brilliant mix of hip, cutting-edge technology combined with fantastical video game logic, and I love it. So, I kind of poo-pooed the oil rig level in my initial review. Not kinda, I really kinda spackled it. I thought perhaps I was too harsh, so I went back to this level with an open mind. Then the mantling mechanics returned and I thought, right, that's why. I had to sort of just jostle the mouse a bit until I got it, but it came. Another thing, and thanks to the person that pointed this out to me, the path I took in my original review was incorrect. I made it work, but it was so frustrating. As it turns out, it was basically not meant to be played that way. So, it took me 23 years, but I found the right path. But most of my thoughts on the oil rig haven't changed much. Pure action and platforming are not this game's strong suit, and this level tends to have a bit of both. Following the IT tech in broad daylight without much cover, get too close and you blow the mission, yada yada. It's just not that good. The graphics were phenomenal, with that gorgeous day glow, but it doesn't elevate the level much. It's not too hard, and I wasn't like screaming in rage or anything silly, but the fact is, the oil rig is just kind of boring. Thankfully, the slump that is the oil rig is quickly forgotten once we get to the CIA. This is an S-tier level, one of the best in the entire franchise. It starts in a gorgeous exterior where Sam is being drenched in heavy rain.
Jason!
We're then told that they're about to turn the big fans on exactly where Sam needs to go, so you better run fast. From there, we sneak through the lobby of waxed floors and metal detectors and big rugs, and I don't know, there's something about breaking into a friendly place on US soil right under the noses of our countrymen that's just so tight. It's like being in Red Cell, a reference that nobody will get. Anyway, this level is just stylish, with that near future yet deceptively plain office layout. Especially with this gorgeous atmospheric lighting bathing this quiet, calm hallway in subdued green hues. You can practically smell that clean, freshly vacuumed carpet, server room dust, and government coffee. I tend to lean on the word atmosphere a lot in my reviews, but it cannot be overstated how palpable the atmosphere in the CIA level is. The mood of this level kind of sums up what I love most about the first Splinter Cell, aesthetically speaking. Sneaking through these familiar office-type locations after hours, when the lights are low, a thunderstorm happening right outside of the windows. I mentioned something like this in my Double Agent review, but it's oddly soothing to move about in a warm, high-tech facility, sheltered from the elements, while drifting right by everyone like a ghost. I don't know, I just gravitate towards this level design so much. Stalking these dark corridors with a strict no-kill order is tense and memorable, especially since this is where you get the SC-20K, a rifle based on the FN-2000. Funny enough, Lambert says out loud F-2000, but the subtitle says SC-20K. Maybe it was a licensing thing, but Don Jordan had already recorded the line, whatever. This is Fisher's trademark tool, a 5.56 Belgian bullpup with an array of gadgets. I love that Ubi chose to give Sam this weapon instead of a classic M4 or AR variant. It's so distinctly Splinter Cell, and somehow fits the character really well stylistically. This allows Sam to use more non-lethal gadgets like the airfoil round, which is basically just a big thick metal ring that knocks people out, as well as the sticky shocker, which is perfect for a one-hit KO. If that fails, Sam has a big dumb elbow that he can throw at people. It sucks, but oh well.
Whatever.
There are some other butt-puckeringly intense scenarios as well, like disabling wall mines surrounding a group of hostages. One little mistake in your timing, and you're gonna have shit all over these walls, Ray. Then suddenly, you're put on a timer to find and defuse a bomb, after which you decelerate right back into stealth. I really love these sort of gameplay intervals, if that makes sense. These brief rushes of adrenaline before dialing it back into sneaking. It's pretty gosh darn cool. One last thing to talk about is that the levels are pretty much as linear as you may have heard, but that's how most video games were back then. Before everything had to be a big, empty open world with a million boring side quests. And while I really love the more open maps in Chaos Theory, the linearity in the original game doesn't make it less enjoyable. And there are little shades of dynamic gameplay here and there to boot. In Kalina Tech, there's an IT tech bleeding out on the floor, and he asks to be taken to the infirmary. For years, I just figured this was there to add a little gravitas to the scenario. After all, civilians being wasted in an office is pretty grim, but if you actually hoist his body into the infirmary and plop him down, he'll rebound. He thanks Fisher and gives us a bit of valuable information for our troubles. It doesn't change the story or anything like that, but it's cool to see a smidgen of dynamism in video games when that wasn't commonplace. And that sums up the gameplay of Splinter Cell overall, a title that came along and really pushed video games, especially stealth video games, forward another notch. It's a bit of a patient game, which is, quite honestly, something I really miss. Everything feels so hurried anymore. TikTok, DoorDash, Amazon, now. Instant gratification. Take a break. Shoot some hoop. Relax. Everything is going to be okay. I've said this over and over across so many videos, but it can't be overemphasized how valuable lighting is to the presentation of a video game. It's why, despite aging textures, Splinter Cell still looks gorgeous. Now in 2002, I had never seen a video game that used light and shadow to paint such a lovely picture. This was before Doom 3, it was before Riddick, it was before Fear. Splinter Cell took this presentation and weaved it into the gameplay mechanics as well, elevating it to a class unto its own. True, the character models have aged like hot milk, and the hand-drawn animations obviously aren't capable of achieving the fluidity of mocap that we see so often nowadays. But the tone that this game cultivates makes it timeless. Sneaking behind a lattice covered in vines as beams of moonlight illuminate the path, covering Fisher in gorgeous stencil shadows, is something that no amount of modern-day graphical fidelity can overcome with simple realism. And look, I play modern games. This isn't old man yelling at clouds, but think about it. we still admire Starry Night over the Rhone 137 years later. Meanwhile, modern art is about as inspired as a parking violation, and at least a parking ticket isn't going to be used as tax evasion for the rich. Well, maybe it is, I don't know. But look, I'm not going to ramble on for another eon. Despite Splinter Cell being shrouded in darkness, the game also sports lovely colors from time to time, from the setting sun over the oil rig to the beautiful splashes of green, orange, red, and yellow, contrasting wonderfully against the starry sky above China.
China?
Another big flex for the time were the cloth physics. Big deal now, I know, but in 2002, especially on a console, this really was impressive. Shower liners, hanging sheets, and the butcher strip curtains that sway in the breeze and react to Fisher's body as he breaks through them. Lovely. There were also several little details that stood out, like Sam's molly pouches bouncing on his belt as he runs around or hangs upside down. There's also the fish tank. Can anyone else think of a game that has an effect like this? If you put a bullet in the aquarium, the water will drain up to that point. Pardon me, I'm trying to look at this. No, excuse me, sir. Outside of all the stylish tech fantasy stuff, the game can also surprise you with a splash of spooky. This hall in the presidential palace is nearly out of a horror game. The cold color palette with the curtains swaying in the open windows. No music, no bravado, just the howling wind and the bodies.
Have you started yet? Fisher!
I don't think I emphasized enough how immaculate the sound design was in my original review. And Ubi wasted no time convincing this. In the tutorial missions, you'll pass through a sound room. This is not only teaching the player about the importance of sound as it pertains to stealth, but it's smart thematically because you could buy that a place like this actually exists in some high-tech government facility. It also serves to highlight the masterful Foley work. The gentle clang of chains, the crunch of glass under your boots, metal grating, and so forth. Every little effect in the game is distinct and delivered with high fidelity. From the throttle of the lockpicking down to subtle effects, like the jingle of brass when you reload the SC-20K. Most notably, there's the night vision sound effect, which is simply iconic. Like the design of the goggles, the sound effect isn't based on reality, but as I said in my original review, it gives Sam's trademark look a trademark sound. So I don't think that the soundtrack to Splinter Cell is going to be on your driving playlist or anything like that, but I really do love the music in this game, which was composed by Michael Richard Plowman. The music is kind of like the soundtrack in the game Fear, where it's not out in front, equal to the gameplay or the visuals, but it does a fantastic job of enhancing each of those aspects. I love the thumping beat mixed with the spooky female choir. It's oddly soothing and it always stirs the nostalgia in me. The Max Payne-esque action scene music is pretty cheesy, but it's fun and it's rare. The big thing Splinter Cell had going for it, sonically, was Michael Ironside voicing Sam Fisher. This was during the boom period of gaming where companies were chasing Grand Theft Auto and trying to nab celebrity voice actors for their games. Look, Vice City is one of the best video games ever made, an all-time favorite of mine. But it definitely had some pretty prominent stunt casting. I mean, come on, Candy sucks.
Here we go. Fisher interrogates enemy soldiers who obviously have no information, but he just interrogates them for the hell of it.
Stay quiet. You don't want your life to end in the boys' room.
The difference here is Michael Ironside really took the role seriously, and by embracing gaming, which was still very young at the time, he helped to elevate the medium as a real storytelling vehicle. Outside of a handful of titles, most video games were still relying on shallow characters spouting cliches from action movies. Evidently, the character of Sam Fisher was initially written as more of a generic, thoughtless, tough guy killing machine. Ironside agreed to the role under the condition that he be able to modify Sam Fisher to reflect a much wider spectrum of emotions, and not the spectrum that you're on. Because of Michael Ironside's acting methods, Sam Fisher ended up becoming much more fascinating. Not to jump too far ahead in the review timeline, I'll get there, but I can't stand Eric Johnson as what they tried to pass off as Sam Fisher in Splinter Cell Blacklist. It just came off like an unnatural tough guy act and reduces the character to a generic Billy badass.
What the hell?
Where are you keeping the American soldiers?
Grinko will kill me.
He's not as creative as I am. Where are they?
Ow! Oh! Oh!
Where?
The basement.
Ironside couldn't do Blacklist as he was battling cancer during that time, but has since recovered thankfully. His cameo in Ghost Recon Wildlands proved that he still had it as Sam Fisher. Michael Ironside is in his mid-70s now, and unfortunately chose to pass the role down to Liev Schreiber for the upcoming animated series on Netflix. So, Blacklist came out in 2013. Wildlands came out in 2017. Ubisoft has had all of that time, 12 years in total, to give the character a proper send-off with the man himself in the role, and they did nothing with him. Good job, boys. You blew it. Being developed by Ubisoft Toronto, the team behind Splinter Cell Blacklist, Watch Dogs Legion, and Far Cry 6. The Splinter Cell remake was announced in December of 21, and according to rumors and whispers, it's still in development. The game is set to use the Snowdrop engine, which had previously been used for Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, as well as Star Wars Outlaws. Look here, listen. I want this remake to succeed in the worst possible way. I disagree with the argument that Sam Fisher doing the gritty in Fortnite will introduce a new generation to Splinter Cell. Introduce them to what? A franchise that's been dead for 12 years? That's my job. Look, I don't hate Fortnite, okay? Calm down. But are you saying that kids of today really need a lead-in? Did you need a free-to-play shooter to get you into the series? No, and you and I damn sure weren't any smarter in our youth, even if we'd like to think so. So with that said, how's about we let Splinter Cell introduce new people to Splinter Cell? And this remake could be the ticket. As good as the old trilogy is, and it is, younger people might find it a little too punishing, and we can't hold that against them. I could play old Splinter Cell all day, and I just did. But I mean, can you imagine trying to get kids into cassette tapes after they grew up with Spotify? Like, a remake with flash graphics, smooth controls, and modern-day gaming conveniences could be just what the doctor ordered. And evidently, the team is avoiding a hackneyed open world and sticking with linear levels. Thank God. This is the way. The masses are dumb, but most individuals are very perceptive and quite bright and can understand the value of a video game that doesn't take place in a giant boring sandbox. And when people say the Ubisoft of old is dead, that's not entirely true. It's different and a lot has changed, of course, but Clint Hawking has come back, and he's the Mac Daddy of Splinter Cell, the creative director of Chaos Theory, the best of the best. If Ubisoft is smart, don't hold your breath, they'll consult with him and take his advice to heart. The big question mark is, how are they going to change the story? Given the times we live in, China will probably be the good guys, Wilkes will be on hormones, and Sam Fisher will pass the goggles to Grimm's daughter as she insults him for being a relic of the past or some dumb shit. But hey, maybe that's me being pessimistic. Hey, wait a minute.
Hell no, goddammit.
In my initial review, I discussed how important Splinter Cell was to the original Xbox. Halo Combat Evolved was the big system seller, but Splinter Cell was the game that really helped to demonstrate how powerful this new console was, and showed off the potential of what the system could do. In doing this Redux review, I wanted to reflect on why I chose this series to start the channel with. I wanted to cover Splinter Cell because, for its day, it was the most striking demonstration of gaming as a stylish, elegant art form to show the average square. Now, gamers already knew this. People who had played Metal Gear Solid, Ocarina of Time, and System Shock 2 already knew what a valid form of entertainment this was, but for most, gaming was still seen as somewhat of a goofy kid's toy, a shiny, colorful, loud distraction for simple minds. With Splinter Cell, a person who had no interest in this stuff could see this game and be able to appreciate the effort that clearly went into it. It's hard to explain, and it's more or less an intangible feeling, but it felt like this was something a bit more refined. The visuals were cutting edge at the time, and showing a non-gamer the image of Sam Fisher creeping through these realistic, dynamically lit levels looked a bit like a moving painting. And you don't have to be a gamer to recognize the talent and discipline that it must take to create something like that. My initial audience for the channel was a few family members and a couple of coworkers, mostly people who not only don't care about video games, but some people that actively dislike them. I figured, what better way to show off this art form than with a retrospective on something that helped to elevate the medium beyond their preconceived notions. I don't know how else to say this without sounding like a pretentious knob, so I'll just say it. I go back to these kinds of games because I'm being transported to these worlds that I love spending time in. Games like BioShock, Mass Effect, The Unfinished Swan, and certainly Splinter Cell are experiences that feel special and handcrafted, made by people who really took pleasure in flexing not only their skills with programming, but their artistic caliber and vision as well. I am hoping with all of my heart that the Splinter Cell remake and the upcoming Netflix adaptation will breathe new life into the series that many of you watching this channel grew up with. A series that has been dormant for way too long. Well, I hate to say it, but the odds are slim, and I'll believe it when I see it. But in the meantime, at least you can still find and enjoy the original Splinter Cell. It's on Steam, and with a little bit of tweaking, you can get it running pretty easily, and the PC version is the bee's knees. If you have an Xbox One or a Series X, however, the original Xbox disc will still work, and is even enhanced. It's fantastic. And although it has many rough edges, if you can take the time to learn the mechanics, you can truly have a lot of fun sneaking around in this first entry. Ubisoft, please, I implore you, go back to making good products. I know we assume that the TikTok generation are a bunch of dummies with the attention span smaller than a tsetse fly's dick. If you give them something good and not the same old boring empty open world games over and over, they will come. We all did, and we gave you a lot of money for it too. And especially nowadays, word of mouth is more powerful than it's ever been. I know I can be kind of snarky and a bit mean-spirited, but in the end, it all comes from a place of love. I'm a hopeless romantic. What do you want? I want to see the company succeed instead of sucking seed. There's still time to right the ship. That is, when you're ready to wake up and stop trying to appease the hoi polloi of paper tigers with whatever this shit is.
I am not your damn brother! Do what you want. Pull the plug.
Hi, I'm gonna kill you.